The Texas Governor Greg Abbott is expected to sign a controversial gun bill into law.
Authorities say Omar Mateen arrived at Pulse Orlando, a gay nightclub and bar, armed with an AR-15 type assault rifle, a handgun, and an unknown number of rounds of ammunition.
It would mean you can carry a handgun in Texas without having a license, without having a permit, with no background check, and no training.
It's terrible. He's my only child.
Okay, every other year on September 1st, that's a big day. That's when the new laws from the legislative session typically go into effect. So keep your eyes open for them starting today, including the big one that you just mentioned, permitless carry, or constitutional carry, called by some. People can now carry handguns in public without any kind of license or training.
This is a bill that was passed in spring of 2021 and is now roaring into life as of September 1st, 2021. And essentially, like, what it breaks down to from just an everyday human's point of view is the state is stripping the need for really a lot of eligibility requirements when it comes to buying and carrying a firearm. So specifically, there's no more need for any training, there's no more need for background checks, and there's no need to have a license.
We have successfully fought off permitless carry for quite a few legislative sessions, and this session was the end of our success.
I'm against it. It doesn't seem like a wise thing to do from a public safety perspective. I don't see any good reason why we shouldn't make people get a license to open carry a handgun.
I think of it in terms of even driving a car. You know, we would never in a million years, put, like, I have a 15-year-old son. I would not dream of putting that child in the driver's seat without thorough, extensive education, practice with trusted people, trusted adults, and then going in for that final licensing. And to me, certainly a car can be a deadly weapon. That's a whole lot of metal. It's a whole lot of power. And to not take that same approach and thoughtful consideration with how we treat access to a firearm.
But to hear instructors saying things like, you guys, we have people who come to our class, our 4-hour class, who bring the wrong ammunition for the firearm that they've purchased. That's terrifying to me as a mother, to think that there's people that could be openly carrying right now who don't even know how to operate their firearm.
Looking specifically in the hunting community or the, competitive shooting community, like, that is 101. Like, you don't get to do anything with a firearm until you understand, like, what it's capable of doing and how to keep yourself safe as well. I have a 15-year-old son and a 4-year-old son. My 15-year-old is a sophomore in high school, and he also happens to be transgender. And there's been so much sort of angst and, like, difficult legislation in Texas connected to LGBTQ plus rights, where we're seeing these increased cases of bullying in a very real and noticeable way, even within my son's school. That the idea of throwing in additional firearms, making them more accessible in the home where other teenagers might be able to get to them. It's really this, like, crossover. It's like this nightmare Venn diagram of something that it elevates it's not just, I fear for school shootings, or I fear for, my children and my family's safety when we're out in any public space, but add on to that, this really tense dialogue around transgender kids in Texas, LGBTQ plus kids and adults, period. It just feels like it's adding more fuel to a very dangerous fire.
But permitless carry They promised us, Abbott and Dan Patrick promised us that there wouldn't be blood in the streets, but there's been blood in the streets. There's blood in the streets every single day. The amount of Texans that we lose, it just goes up every single year. We've tried it their way, but they continue to abandon responsible gun ownership. My concern is, of course, that this will make it easier for my students to get a hold of guns.
I am at the point where, I memorize his outfit, his shoes, what backpack he's using that day, what his hair looks like, what ball cap he's wearing, for fear that, I will need to identify him. I'll need to tell someone how to find him. Sorry. This is very stressful. And I hate that it's our reality.
The most recent killing took place last Sunday in North Philadelphia. Michelle Tamika Washington, 40 years old and a longtime advocate for the LGBTQ community, was shot several times. Her death came one day after Malaysia Booker was found dead in Dallas. Booker was just 23, and just weeks before her death, she was attacked in a mob-like beating after a minor traffic accident. 1 week before those murders, 21-year-old Claire Legato was shot in the head in Cleveland. She was killed after an argument between her mother and the suspected shooter. Earlier this year, 2 more Black transgender women, Ashanti Carmen and Dana Martin, were also killed. Last year, more than 24 transgender people were killed. And according to a 2018 Human Rights Campaign report, there were at least 128 trans people killed in 32 states since 2013. 80% of them were people of color.
6 minutes and about 20 seconds. In a little over 6 minutes, 17 of our friends were taken from us, 15 were injured, and everyone, absolutely everyone, in the Douglas community was forever altered. Everyone who was there understands. Everyone who has been touched by the cold grip of gun violence understands. For us, long, tearful, chaotic hours in the scorching afternoon sun were spent not knowing. No one understood the extent of what had happened. No one could believe that there were bodies in that building waiting to be identified for over a day. No one knew that the people who were missing had stopped breathing long before any of us had even known that a code red had been called.
My students, we talk very openly about it. After the shooting in Florida, my students wanted to have a big kind of public show of defiance, and they organized the Houston walkout, the Houston student walkout. And they organized, it was, HSPVA students sitting down with Lamar students, sitting down with Bel Air students. They coordinated with Houston ISD schools everywhere. But all of the students ended up marching and walking, and we met in front of City Hall. They had to put the permit for to be able to amplify sound, and they needed a permit to get porta potties. And so the amount of learning that they went through to we want to do a protest. What is that like? And it was student led. A lot of teachers took off. I took a personal day and had a substitute so that I could walk with them and be there to support them. They asked a few legislators to speak, like Representative Jean Wu, Mayor Sylvester Turner spoke. So it was really beautiful to see the support of local Houston leaders. But probably the most powerful moment of the whole presentation, Sophie Cardenas, who was one of my students, got up and she's like, "Okay, you guys, we're going to scream. We want all of Houston to hear us. We're going to scream for a full minute. And then when you see my arms go like this, we are going to go into complete silence, and we're going to march back to our schools for 17 minutes, a minute for every victim in that school, and we're gonna walk back in complete silence." So they did that, and we lined up, and we had our banner, and we're walking. And as we're walking, I see one of the officers on his horse, and I noticed he's got a tear coming down, and so I couldn't help but look at his name tag. And this guy finds me afterwards, and he comes up to me, and he was like, "Did you help organize this?" And I was like, "No, sir, officer, sir. That was all the students." And he says, "I was supposed to work Barbara Bush's funeral today." I'm gonna get all emotional. He says, "I was supposed to work Barbara Bush's funeral today, but this is the most American thing I've ever seen."
students say they skipped class so that they can have their voices heard, but they're also using this movement to get students to register to vote.
What I'm excited about is every single year, that's a batch of students that just turned 18 that can vote, and they know what it's like.
People care a lot about their guns. I think more than people realize. I know several people that guns is the only issue they vote on in the presidential election, and they don't care about anything else. They just care about how this is going to affect my ability to carry a gun.
When something has happened to you, when you have been locked in a room for fear of someone about to break down your classroom door with a gun, like, you are motivated in ways that no 60-year-old white male politician possibly could.
You guys know what it's like. The more we increase the voter pool of people who know what it's like and had to hide under a desk, I think the closer we get to putting the pressure that we've needed for decades to finally start addressing this issue.